Absolutely. And so, in the same way that we've talked about how amazing all of these tools are, all of the exciting innovations that are coming down the pike, there are still challenges that lie within that. There are challenges to the rapid innovation, things moving so quickly, so quickly. So, not only are we still learning as we go, as far as the iterations, the innovations that are happening, but at the same time, we're trying to learn, and then we're kind of trying to keep up with what we're learning. We're trying to teach others what we're learning, and we're still not exactly sure. Like, I think one of the things, like with the generative AI, we're still figuring out how it actually works. So I think that, and that's why I push so much for these ethical frameworks, for the transparency, for even being willing to acknowledge that there are biases, let alone in being able to figure out ways that we can combat that. And so, and I always tell people, it's like, when we're talking about the biases, because they're conscious and unconscious biases. So there might be conscious, or there might be biases, whether that's in the data sets, but the thing is, and I think that we forget a lot of times, there are those, there are those type of biases, but I think that the unconscious biases are where we get, where we can kind of run the risk. Because if you start thinking about, maybe whether those are cultural challenges to the rapid innovation, things moving so quickly, so quickly. So not only are we still learning as we go, as far as the iterations, the innovations that are happening, but at the same time, we're trying to learn, and then we're kind of trying to keep up with what we're learning. We're trying to teach others what we're learning, and we're still not exactly sure. Like, I think one of the things, like with the generative AI, we're still figuring out how it actually works. So I think that, and that's why I push so much for these ethical frameworks, for the transparency, for even being willing to acknowledge that there are biases, let alone in being able to figure out ways that we can combat that. And so, and I always tell people, it's like, when we're talking about the biases, because they're conscious and unconscious biases. So there might be conscious, or there might be biases, whether that's in the data sets. But the thing is, and I think that we forget a lot of times, there are those. There are those type of biases, but I think that the unconscious biases are where we get, where we can kind of run the risk. Because if you start thinking about, maybe whether those are cultural, because if you think about, like, the way that we're designing, the way that we're programming, the way that we're engineering these systems, and if you're looking at, if we look at data sets, and we want to make sure that we've got these clean data sets, we want to make sure that, but we also, one of those data sets that are going into the programming, the engineering of these generative AI models, are the data sets that are that make up the programmer, that make up the engineer. So you're creating, or you might be inputting unconscious biases based on what you think you know, whether that's about a particular person or environment or location. That's where we talk about those dangers that come in, when we're looking at biases that can affect marginalized communities. When we start talking about biases, whether it's by zip code, when we're looking at financial issues, when we're looking at law enforcement, when we're looking at the way that, the privacy, where we're not always being transparent in how some of these tools are being used. And then we're seeing that across the board. And it's like, and I look at that every day, because I'm constantly testing these tools out. And that's one of the things that I look at. And they're like, people will have the privacy policy up there, whatever. It's like, but looking at the actual working of the tools, and it's like, and I've seen tools, and from a very base level, whether that's article writers that were 6 years ago collecting the content of the users and using that user generated content to train data models. Like, that was 5 years ago. That was some of the first writing assistants. So whether it was going from that to, I remember one of the sites that I was using, I'd been creating like a whole year worth of content. Log in one day, everything's gone. And it's like, wait, what? And it's like, and that was actually used as training material for those LLMs. And it's like, but without us, it was not a transparent knowledge about that. And so it was just unfortunate. But again, that was getting the growing pains out. That was like at the very beginning. So in trying to understand and being very transparent about the fact that we don't actually even understand how the tools completely work at this point, how they work with other language models. We're still building all that out. We're at the very beginning of this. Unfortunately, even at the beginning, you're going to still get those bad actors. Like I said, and I laugh about this all the time. I tell my friends, and I'm always saying, if we've got these amazing tools, this amazing technology, and somebody like used all of that intellect to put the Pope in the puffy coat. So there are going to be those things. I think there's one site, I'm not even going to mention the name because I don't want it to like blow up, but there's one site that literally creates animated characters of an NFSW nature. And it's like, there's going to be those people. That type of stuff is going to pop up. So being able to mitigate some of those risks, being able to even recognize what potential risks could be, because everybody, so the thing is, being able to recognize what those potential risks could be so that you can mitigate them, or so that they can be acknowledged in a way that we can make sure that there are frameworks in place to fight biases. We recognize them, we identify them, and have an actual clear process for actually eliminating those biases. And looking at that data, again, like I said, looking at whether that's law enforcement, whether that's in banking, whether that's in health and medical, but using certain biases that could affect marginalized communities. We know, like with law enforcement, lots of false positives when it comes to darker skin tones or the melanated. So, making sure that we are understanding and recognizing, identifying, and mitigating those risks that come with using those technologies fully implemented without us fully understanding what we're doing, and without there being a full and transparent way of explaining to the consumer, to the public, to general use what this tool is actually for, and what the results should be expected. That's definitely one thing that I think that we have missed. And so if you don't know, now you know. I am definitely like, I am that Jetsons kid. It's like, I am that kid that watched the Jetsons after school. And so I've been waiting for this world for a really long time. And I've been joking about this like for years. My children, they're adults now. They've got their own children. But I remember when they were younger, and I would explain about the Jetsons. And, so I've always loved it. And one of the things is that starting from the very beginning, my generation kind of were given this idea or this choice in a way and I always say that we were seeded with the possibilities very, very young. Because when I was young, two of the most popular cartoons that were out at the time, they really kind of gave us the choice. We had the Flintstones that were very traditional family, mother, father, child, traditional roles. The father went out to work, the mother stayed home, very domesticated, the Flintstones, even in the premise of the father's work. Like, he literally went out every day and broke rocks. Like, that was his job. He worked like a stone yard. So very, everything has to be hard. That hard work is what pays off. Very traditional. We were just coming off of early 70s, just beaver cleaver, all these very traditional ways of doing things. And that was the Flintstones. On the other hand, we had the Jetsons. And with the Jetsons, we had this very modern and futuristic family that still very traditional, mother, father, to the 2 point. It became more of was starting to become the American dream of the mid to late 70s, or early 70s, I think, when it first came out. But that 70s new American dream with the mother, father, 2.2 children, and a dog, like that kind of thing. So they were a more modern and futuristic version of a traditional family. And they didn't do as much of the heavy lifting. They actually had tools in place that did all the heavy lifting for them. So you had Rosie. And it's like Rosie was awesome and literally on the dream wish of like every modern homemaker in the 70s. Rosie did it all. Rosie did the cooking, the meal prep. Rosie made sure that she figured out, made sure all the laundry was done. She figured out who was wearing what to school. Everything was laid out. She literally woke them up. Intro to the show was amazing to me. Like I just sat enthralled. Meet George Jetson, his wife Judy, and you go through the whole family, and through all of it, you've got Rosie supporting this family. Rosie's getting people up. She's dropping clothes on them. She's brushing people's teeth. Like Rosie's doing it all. And the thing that always stuck out with me with Rosie, and I laugh when people say, AI is going to take over. It's going to kill us all, take our lives, take our jobs. And one of the things that always struck me, and I tell people all the time, Rosie did not want George Jetson's job. She didn't want the kid's job. She didn't even want the wife's job. Rosie was so content in her role. She loved her role. She liked the job that she did, and she liked to take care of her people. So Rosie was an amazing tool that really supported the whole process. And so didn't try to overstep the bounds. And so Rosie was cool with the family, and she allowed the family to be the family. George still went to work every day. The wife went shopping or did whatever she did because her time was free. Why? Because Rosie was doing all the heavy lifting. That was the whole point. And so understanding, and I always recognize that the machines are designed to be tools to make life easier for us. It really does free us up to go out to be more human in our nature and in the way that we do things. And so that's one of the things that I say now. I'm just so excited about the AI and all of the possibilities. And absolutely, like, there are kinks that need to be worked out. It's like, yes, we do. There are very pressing issues concerning the way that we look at and eliminate biases, the way that we deal with transparency and privacy issues, the way that we look at how these tools and others, like whether it's surveillance or all these other tools and how they affect marginalized communities. Absolutely, those are the kinks that need to be worked out. And we're right at the beginning. So that's why it's so exciting. But I do feel like this is, and I've said this repeatedly, I say this all the time. I do see, I said back in 97, when I had 1997, when I had internet in my home, and my husband at the time, who is now an ex, and part of the reason why is even then could not see the reason. He just felt like it was a waste of money to have this dial up in the home, and we had the AOL, and the little ding when you're trying to log on. Did not understand the purpose of it. Needless to say, 30 years later, the tech is still here with me. Ex-husband is not. But what I always understood is that I knew from the very beginning instinctively the internet was going to change things. When I realized, because I've always been a writer, had the typewriter, mailed a lot of letters, had pen pals. So to send an email and get it to the next person in like 5 minutes, it was a game changer for me. And working in an office at the time and just seeing how it streamlined things. But I knew, I understood instinctively that this was something that was going to be long-term and really important. I felt the same way for the last 8 years about AI. And I do see in the same way that I believe that the internet is a utility, plays a utility role primarily as the underpinnings of most of what we do each day. I very definitely see the AI, which has already been integrated into a lot of products, but I see moving forward, I see it as something that will continue to become more of a utility in our day-to-day lives and in the way and integrated into the way that we're already doing our regular processes, going about our daily lives. So I'm so excited that that future, like, it's almost here. It's like we're almost there. We've got electric cars. We're not quite the flying cars, but So I'm just really excited. And like I said, being willing to pay attention to that there could be biases. Like I said, if you're an engineer, and we've talked about this before, like you're an engineer from a caste system, that you might be in a completely different country, environment, mindset, but there are still that might slip in certain biases. Maybe it's about regions, ideas, people, status or role in society, but there might be tiny biases, and we all have those. And to that could be unconsciously put into whatever it is that we're creating. So just even in recognizing simple biases like that, understanding and being willing to create those frameworks to identify and eliminate, I think is right there is a game changer. And like I said, we're at the beginning. It's only getting better, baby. I can't wait. And like I said, like just seeing how fast the technology has rapidly evolved just in the past year. Like when you look at, like just literally in the past 12 months, when you look at the level of rapid advancement that we've seen just since the OpenAI introduced ChatGPT, but using those type of generative AI and those type of language models to quickly, like we've gone from text, we've gone to image and video generation. So moving very quickly. Look at even how like when the OpenAI ChatGPT was first introduced, the plugins and how like whole businesses were being built around plugins, only to see them go by the wayside because here came GPTs. It's like, will there be other iterations of that? Maybe. But, and I see that with OpenAI and their GPT store, I see that they do plan to be in it for the long haul on the level of like a Android store or the iOS store. So I do see that coming down the pike. I think that it will be even more rapid advancement. Even Sam Altman has said that GPT-4 is only getting better. Like this year, we will see some amazing innovations. So just getting ready for it, being willing, because like I've said, not everybody needs to implement it or integrate right now. Things are changing so quickly. Depending on what your use case is, this might be something that you could maybe understand or be looking towards in the future. But here's the thing, because I know people are so worried about, oh, we're going to lose jobs. Everyone's going to lose jobs. And it's like AI is going to take over our lives, our jobs are. But here's the thing. And I think there was a study that MIT did. And it's like where companies are realizing where they thought that let's get rid of this team or get rid of this department and we can just implement AI. But the AI is going to cost you, buddy. So if you have your human resources, your human, not even resources, if you have your human contributors there that are already doing amazing things, and AI is simply a tool that can be integrated into their workflow that's going to help them streamline their processes, help them be more efficient, help you do more and in a better way. But in no means should anybody, there are very few use cases and industries where people should be considering just tossing out the baby and the bathwater. At this point, AI is very much for the average, is for the average company is literally as its implementation as a tool that can take over certain processes, because we're looking at some of those automated and autonomous agents where they're actually able to do tasks or operate software, those sort of things. So those are implemented in a way that is allowing your current employees to be more efficient. Now, I do believe that there will be needs for up training or upskilling in some way with current employees. And I always say, you might not be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by somebody who uses it. And it's like, so I do believe very much in reskilling and training yourself, even if it's not something that you're necessarily your field, your industry, your company is doing, but even just understanding on a base level how it can work in business operations, whether it's on your analytics side, keeping track of your metrics, whether it's on the first place where we saw these chatbots was in customer service. And then, like I tell people, it's like, and even in designing these autonomous agents or designing these chatbots that are actually interacting with the public, making sure that you are keeping in mind the public. So not only just having the AI designer or engineers, but literally creating teams, what I used to call the co-pilot teams. I do that. But making sure that your AI teams in-house are including not just your engineers, but that are including the input of those whose jobs are going to be, whether it's going to be affected, impacted, whether they're going to implement these tools in their role. But I think that being very clear in what is going to be needed from your current workforce, and then whether that's retraining, reskilling, upskilling, and uptraining, whether that is like those sort of things, having those put into place, I think we will see more of it moving and being integrated into schools. But I do feel like there are still industries where, while we're still working these kinks out, now definitely like on an educational level, not only should it be directly teaching, absolutely not. But as far as like that, again, can be used as an incredible tool for teachers who are doing case studies and lesson plans and who are doing all of these things and working. If we've got administrators, there are ways that those workflows and those processes can be streamlined, that can be more efficient. So absolutely, in certain levels like that, should kids be using it for term papers? Perhaps not. Now, I do feel like on the research side, absolutely. But again, that goes back to consumer education, and it goes back to getting the input, getting the feedback from the general public and from consumers, on and who are and real talk is because they're the ones that are going to actually be affected by the implementation of these tools, whether it's in enterprise, whether it's in business, whether it's in health and medical. Like it's going to be integrated into the things that are going to affect the average consumer or the average general public, the average person. It's going to affect their day-to-day life, and a lot of times they won't have a say in that. So I think that it's really, really important, as we're at the very beginning, the precipice, kind of leaning over, all excited about what's coming next. I think it's really, really important to really be conscious and to consciously focus on creating, and whether that's networks, whether that's focus groups, whether that's these councils that actually contribute the average person's voice to how this advances with this technology. And it's like, and I think that that's one of the things that wasn't necessarily done with the internet. And I think that that kind of on the back end caused some things. And I think that, and I'm not saying harsh and fierce regulations. There absolutely needs to be regulations. But I think that as things are iterating and changing so quickly, there might be regulations that are put in place that might prevent further down the road certain advances or researches or other innovations. So still treading a fine line with that. But again, that goes back to having these panels, teams, these co-pilot teams where you've got people from different, whether that's for, again, like I said, in-house department team, you have your engineer, you've got your AI ethicist, somebody who is looking at, okay, well, what are the biases? Are we looking at the biases? Are we looking at what's the data? Is the data dirty? You want those type of people who are standing back and looking at those type of things, but who is not on your legal team or who is not in your engineering team. You also need somebody who's actually going to implement and use these technologies. So whether that's your content team, whether that's your operations team or your tech support, it's like, but someone who's actually understands how that flow works and having their input as well, because those are the people. And a lot of times, even in looking at like with the implementing of the chatbots, a lot of times there were little nuances and subtleties that you could have a whole team of engineers up there, but it literally was the person who answered the phones or who did the chat who could answer certain questions or understood how a workflow actually worked, and was the only only one, the missing piece in making that workflow more streamlined or more efficient. So having the input of even what we think are the least is what is going to really make the difference in how this advances and how we grow with this technology. And so that we can eliminate some of those fears that are coming about, oh, being taken over, but understanding at all times that this is a tool that we can use to really, I think, do some amazing and life enhancing innovations across the board. And like I said, are there kinks? Yes, there are. Can we get those knots out? Absolutely. If we choose to focus from the very beginning on, like I said, putting those frameworks in place, understanding and being willing to admit that there are biases and that those biases don't come from only certain places, but being willing to see even those unconscious biases, being willing to understand and respect privacy issues. And when it comes to just the general public, being transparent in the way that we're creating these tools, the way we're programming and designing and distributing these tools, is like being very transparent with that. And I think that this can be, I think that it'll be an amazing thing. We just got to get the kinks out. But yeah, so I'm excited. Definitely starting with rigorous, like, so how can we do this in a way that makes it work in the highest good of everyone? And I think that definitely we can start with one, just really with rigorous risk management and those type of frameworks put into place, being willing to really be focused on data integrity. It's like being and also and not and like I said, being willing to respect the fact that biased people are creating, and it's like, and we're creating these images and we have these engines, and we might have unconscious biases. A lot of times that is where biases are coming from. So we're being willing to respect that, and then have a way to double and triple check and be able to evaluate as needed to make sure that we are avoiding these type of biases, that we're identifying, recognizing, and eliminating them quickly in data sets, making sure the data has full integrity, that we're cleaning all the dirty stuff out. And then at a minimum, I think that just really creating frameworks that help us identify, and then also that help AI to allow it to self identify its biases, and then be able to just kind of stop, redo, and then pivot in a way that can greatly reduce the harm that it could cause using those biases. So creating ways to self identify biases, just in the same way that we always say, like, self awareness, but allowing a way to program or create these frameworks where the AI is self-identifying these type of biases, or self-checking, like, and always having that human in the loop that is doing the backup, but getting it to the point where it's self-checking. I think that by itself can do amazing things.